Okay. So, good afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch and that you are still awake so that you can follow this session. This session is about MOOCs, and I assume you know more or less what it is, but we have 3 specialists here to explain it and what they are and what are the possibilities, problems, and so on. Just to introduce ourselves, my name is Jan Engelen. I have been teaching at the University of Leuven, the Catholic University of Leuven, that is in Belgium, and I have been involved in quite a lot of research on accessibility, electronic accessibility in the past. The 3 speakers for this afternoon are Mathieu Nebra, Susanna Loren, and Sebastian Keller, and I asked them to present themselves and their background very briefly. So, Mathieu, can you start?
Okay. My name is Mathieu, and I'm the co-founder of Open Classrooms, which is one of the largest MOOCs platform in Europe. And I've been providing MOOCs for more than 16 years now. And I've been the author of many online MOOCs. So I write, I publish videos, and I have quite an experience in the MOOC field.
Okay, Susanna?
My name is Susanna Loren. I'm the CEO of a Swedish consultancy in accessibility and user experience called Funka. We do a lot of work with the European Commission, as well as some research. Around 20% of our overall turnover is funded by research funding, but otherwise we do user testing and a lot of things. And now, since a couple of months also, we're doing something with learning management systems, so that's why I'm in this panel.
And Sebastian?
So, hi, I'm Sebastian. I work in Stuttgart Media University in Germany, and I'm a researcher in the field of learning and accessibility. So, what am I doing there? We are running a big European project on creating a MOOC across Europe that teaches internet accessibility, and of course that course also has to be accessible itself.
Okay, so you now know the specialists that are together here. First question is, Sebastian, can you explain us briefly what is a MOOC?
So the word MOOC is M-O-O-C. It stands for Massive Open Online Course. Massive means that there is a lot of participants usually, or at least the platform or the course itself, the design supports so. Open means that the content is open. Usually it's open educational resources, but it could also be just meaning that it's open for anyone to join the course. It could be people who want to get a degree out of it, or maybe they are just interested in the topic. Online means, well, online, that it's in the internet and it works. And a course is a course, it's a content for teaching that's structured in a way that is logically building up on each other.
Just one question from my side. The fact that it is open doesn't mean it is for free. Following such a course.
Not necessarily free, but usually, at least in our project, we are trying to make everything as free as possible, but you can actually get a certificate and then you have to pay for it.
For the certificate, you mean?
Only for the certificate.
Okay. Well, the next question we have prepared is actually, can MOOCs and online learning platforms complement the more classic learning environments, or are they something completely different? And maybe Mathieu, you can refer to this, answer to this.
Yeah, from what I've seen people using MOOCs when they have school aside, and they try to learn by themselves during the nights or during the weekends, because they want to take full advantage of what they can see online to learn faster or go back in time if they did not understand something in the classroom. Some people have learned on open classrooms, for instance, at the age of 12 or 13 and started to understand the concepts behind computer programming many years before they could have programming lessons at school. So it shows that people can actually learn before what we thought by themselves. And of course, when people do have courses in a classical environment, they tend to go online to get some content too when they didn't understand fully. When they understand fully, they don't need to go online mostly, or they come to help others from what I've seen. And in the more professional field of MOOCs, because we have very different publics going online. I've seen people trying to change their jobs by learning on MOOCs to get new how can I say, new things that they can do by themselves to say, okay, I can get a new job with this. But actually, their problem is that they can't have an official certificate recognized by the state to do this. But people are already using MOOCs to get a new job, and some are starting to use MOOCs by adding something to their learning environment. Because if they have during the day someone teaching them in front of them, they can also have a computer with a MOOC to get some more content and more feedback. And this way, we've got some exchange between the online and the offline platforms. From what I've seen, what works best is what we call the flipped classroom.
Excuse me?
The flipped classroom.
Flipped, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is when you learn alone at home for the basic concepts, and you use your time with a teacher or with someone who knows by doing actual work in front of them, so they can pass along and help you when you're stuck, so they can be more helpful than trying to speak to everyone and hoping that everyone is understanding.
Okay. Susanna, you had the idea that you have some extra advantages for specific groups?
Well, I mean, it's obvious in a conference like this that for students with disabilities, there can be an enormous difference between learning something from a paper like this. If you have print disabilities, doesn't at all teach you, or it's not possible to comprehend or to be accessible the content. So I mean, everything that is digital has the possibility of being accessible in another way than print in sort of normal paper books and so on. So for certain groups, that will be the difference between having the possibility to study on your own or with a group, and not being able to do it, because if you're in a sort of ordinary classroom and the learning material is not accessible to you, you need something very special, and that can be very stigmatizing for a student with disabilities. So I think that the possibilities for some groups are fantastic if the learning environment is accessible, that is, of course. But
Well, that's actually the theme of this afternoon discussion, how to make them accessible, or if they are accessible or not yet. Okay, so it's clear that there is special usability by people with an impairment to learn through these MOOCs, and that's the reason why it is on the program today. That's clear. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the status of platforms, current platforms, from an accessibility point of view?
I think just to end the former question a bit, I think the possibility of every individual to have something specific. I mean, that the learning platform or MOOC can have my profile, my specifics in it. That's I think the real advantage of building something on the internet, so that every user can have exactly what he or she needs or prefers. And the status of I cannot speak for the status of all the MOOCs in the world because I don't know, but we have done a lot of studies in, I think just before the research project that Sebastian is working on. We helped the Commission with looking into different MOOCs that were available at that time, and also in Scandinavia we have done several reports from the Authority of Special Pedagogical Issues. This is gone? This is also accessibility, all the techniques that you need. Thank you. And the status of the learning management systems that are used, at least in Northern Europe, we didn't find anything that is even remotely accessible. And in the MOOCs, there are some that have some good qualities in what we call the technical parts of accessibility, which means WCAG 2.0 AA, and also a lot of support for assistive technology. But as far as I know now, and these two gentlemen may disagree with me, and hopefully they are into something that is very much better. But at the time when we looked into it, I think it was 2010 or 2011, we didn't find anything that had support for cognitive issues. We didn't have support for motor impairments and so on. So the status overall was quite low level of accessibility, and also some of the systems were extremely difficult to use on a sort of general user experience level as well. The teachers thought they were extremely hard to work with, and the parents, when the parents are in lower education, and the parents are supposed to also interact with what their children is doing, they couldn't figure out what was happening. And now we see a larger move towards things that are mobile and platform responsive from different platforms and so on. And I think that will hopefully move all of this forward so that the user experience is better, and hopefully also the accessibility will be much higher.
Yeah. What I have learned in preparing this session is that there are, well, as you heard, quite a lot of MOOCs and MOOC providers available or on the market. And one of the questions that mainly universities are posing themselves now, do we have to do this? Is this something that is important? And the answer clearly is yes. If you don't do it, then you will lose lots of your students in the future. So the question actually then is, what is a key consideration for a school or a university wishing to create an accessible learning environment, or wishing to adopt an existing one? I mean, it's probably not very simple, but what is key? What has a school or university have to do to start this kind of experience with MOOCs? And I thought, Sebastian, you could answer this.
Okay, yes, so it's a very tough question because I have to really say that to the second part of the question where you asked about what do they do to adopt an existing system to make it accessible, actually my advice is probably better don't, because all the legacy content and things like this is really hard to deal with. But of course, there's really no easy way around, and you will have to at some point face that challenge. However, the experience we made that works good for us in Stuttgart and beyond is that we were starting to have a dialogue with other universities around Europe, and we just decided to do a joint curriculum. In this case, it happens to be web accessibility, but it could be a different topic as well, of course. And so we just started to analyze, similar to you, Susanna, what existing MOOC platforms out there have a good level of accessibility at the current point, and how, in what respect are they committed to enhance things further. We decided then to go to a MOOC platform that supports accessibility to a good level. We did some user testing as well. with people with disabilities. We had them actually take a course there and sought their judgment. And finally, we together across Europe started to build a course. So of course now it's not quite finished yet, but it will be out in October, and then hopefully we will have the accessibility level we want so much. Yeah.
But it is, sorry. Yeah, sorry, but this course is really meant and started as a MOOC.
Yes.
It's not complementing an existing education somewhere, or
Yeah, because of the requirement that it has to be a MOOC, we wanted to also join together for that reason, that we want to have a high visibility, high outreach. We are facing a big number of potential students in the course, so it supersedes the university level. But at the same time, each of the partners commits also to integrate this course into their existing curricula, which we will see how it works out. There's been some difficult politics involved here, but that's the goal. Yeah.
well, some of these politics I do understand, because universities are not used to remunerate their people based on what they are doing online. They just count publications and so on. And working on a MOOC and working on education in general is very time consuming, even more when it's a MOOC. And our traditional schools and universities are not used to take that into account in promotion and so on. So I understand that very much. Next question I have in mind is, what are actually technical and functional barriers that prevent online courses to become fully accessible? Well, Mathieu, you know a lot about it.
The experience I have with accessible MOOCs was mainly one MOOC we made with a consultancy company, which is Sopra, which is a big consultancy company, and they wanted to make an accessible MOOC. So they told us, we come to you because we want, we know you know how to make MOOCs, but we want to make a fully accessible MOOC. So the customer did not completely know what accessible meant, and even though we were sensible to the accessibility problems, even for ourselves, it was hard to define completely accessible. So we had to define boundaries for this. And the MOOC was published after doing three main points of work. One was on the platform itself, to how to go to the MOOC, how to navigate through the platform. So we worked on the platform to make it fully accessible for people with disabilities, mainly visual disabilities and motor disabilities. And then we mainly did videos. So for people who could not hear, with hearing disabilities, we added, of course, subtitles. And for people with visual disabilities, we made a spoken version of the course, which was visual. So we had someone telling what was going on the screen. So of all these things, what cost the most was having an actor saying what was going on the screen, because the rest of the things were quite easy for us. So this is for the technical.
You mean this could not be automized? You had to have people doing it.
Yeah. But we had quite a success with this MOOC, and people with real disabilities followed it. So we tried to have almost 10 or 20 people telling us how they use the MOOC with their disabilities. So we were happy to understand that this worked for them, and maybe many other people, because even people who had no disabilities at all were quite surprised that we had subtitles or a
Yeah.
more accessible platform. So it was a benefit for everyone, in fact. So that is for the technical barriers. We need to understand how the technical aspects work. So we need a technical point of view. But for the functional point of view, in my opinion, what makes a problem is that the people involved do not understand what is accessibility. And to help them in better understanding what is accessibility, they need to see different people with different disabilities using their MOOCs and telling them, I just can't see or use the first chapter of the course. And this way, people will be more sensible to MOOCs.
Did you install in your system a kind of feedback on accessibility issues?
Yeah, but not something automatic. Maybe in the near future we are planning to do this. But we sent newsletters with polls and etc. to have feedbacks from people, and we gathered this feedback because it was useful for us and for the customer who wanted to show that his MOOC was accessible.
Just as a matter of curiosity, what is the MOOC about?
Oh, it's about a programming language, Java.
Okay, very useful anyhow. Okay, question which often is around when we have people, especially people with a disability or with an impairment, studying through computers is, isn't there any danger for more isolation? I mean, when people have to go to school or university, they at least have to meet some people. One of the reasons why people like to be here, to be honest. But if we do much more over computers, we might actually result in more isolation for the people with a disability. Is there solution for that or an answer, Sebastian?
Well, it's a question I've been thinking about, and it's I would say the danger is not so big as it may seem, because it's with dealing with accessibility in teaching and learning is also about empowerment of people, and so they can be more independent in their life as a student or a person who just wants to improve on knowledge in a certain subject. And I'm thinking that if we in addition to existing paradigms in teaching, if we widen the offer to a good online learning experience that is accessible for everyone, then we will definitely give people more options and actually bring education to people who otherwise might not have the chance to get that education. So saying this is a dangerous thing really only is maybe the case in extreme cases where people are forced into only participating in a curriculum online, and they have no choice but to only do that. Maybe by some kind of strange political decisions on the board of a university or something like this. I don't think it's a real danger though.
Yeah, but the basic idea of a MOOC is that you don't really need face-to-face contacts.
You could,
or is a mixture is possible, I presume, but it's not very efficient if your readers are in Asia or in Africa. But
it's true that MOOCs in general are targeting a very wide and widely distributed audience, and I think that you can choose if you are going to be online in a course that's available in the internet, or maybe you don't have a course at all. I mean, this is really...
Yeah. Yes, please.
I think if the If you have to choose from not being able to participate or participating on the internet, then it could be better to be able to do it at all. And I think sometimes we overestimate the risks with these kind of things, because there are also some people with or without diagnosis that prefer not to have face-to-face contact. There are many people with mental illnesses and psychological problems that really, they can do this, but they maybe couldn't do a face-to-face things. And on the other hand, there is a majority of, I think at least, of people that need the face-to-face as well. So I mean, this is just as individual as the requirements for accessibility. I mean, we are humans, and that means that we are diverse. And some people can do this and some people cannot. And of course, we cannot force disabled people to be somewhere else. I mean, that would be discrimination and very risky. But as long as it's an offer and something that hopefully makes it better and easier for people with disabilities, I think it's only positive. But you always need to listen to people. Do you like this way of studying or not? I mean, that must be an individual decision.
Well, that's something I was thinking over, is that more and more people, and definitely not only people with an impairment, are working online, have friends online. They, even if they can go out of their house to meet their neighbors, they will talk by Facebook instead of face-to-face. But at least they have the option. People with an impairment sometimes don't have the option to do that. But okay. Yeah, next question is actually, when the MOOC has so many people working on it, developing for it, how is it then possible to maintain a certain level of accessibility? This is again for you, Mathieu.
I see mainly two ways to maintain a high level of accessibility on an online platform. The first one is to make everyone sensible, and especially the teachers, in accessibility. They need to understand what is accessibility, because most people don't. Yeah. So we just need a basic MOOC explaining how accessibility impacts the way of learning online. The first one is just to have this sensibility.
You see this as a kind of prerequisite before they can collaborate.
Maybe we can make this a prerequisite. I'm not a big fan of prerequisite, but I'm a big fan of teaching as many people as possible. And I think people do not care about accessibility because they do not know about accessibility issues.
That's often the case,
that's the first point.
Yeah.
The second point I see, and this is more maybe a personal point of view, but I think the platform is mainly responsible for the accessibility of the content. Because if we have very diverse people involved in creating content on the platform, like on Open Classrooms, well, you can't expect a high level of understanding of accessibility to everyone. Everyone must understand accessibility, but cannot have a high level. So this is a responsibility of the platform and the people behind the platform, maintaining the platform, to teach and to help people creating courses online to see where it's going to be accessible and where it's not going to be accessible. So we can correct the course before it's done. Because on many platforms, the teacher is almost alone and the platform is not helping him on how to create a good online course and a good accessible course. So this is the position of Open Classrooms. We think that we need to help the teacher in creating an online course because we have knowledge about how online courses work and don't work. And, well, we let people understand and get better at it because we teach them by being involved with them. That's mainly the principle of teaching.
Yeah. Yes, but I still see a problem in the sense, for example, when a teacher wants to have a PDF document, you must make sure that it's not a PDF document of scanned pages.
Absolutely. And
that kind of things has to be controlled.
But we do. In fact, for my experience, that's what we do. The teacher gives us what he wants to put online, and when it's a scanned PDF, we just say, well, no way, but no way because. And of course, have you seen this MOOC on accessibility? Please have a look at it. And having this widely open MOOC for everyone available at any time, and having some kind of people teaching to teachers inside the platform, I think we can achieve a good level of accessibility overall on the platform.
I have a somewhat different question now. There is a huge popularity of MOOCs, but a word which I haven't heard yet is standards. Do we have standards for MOOCs in general, for MOOC accessibility? Suzanne?
Well, the simple question is no.
Okay, then it's easily solved, but
Yeah, but the standards we have on online tools and web accessibility is primarily very technical focus and very assistive technology focus, and goes for mostly one-way communication or information that goes one way. And of course, a MOOC is dynamic and flexible and needs interaction from both sides. So that needs more requirements and more standards. So I hope that we can provide more standards on cognitive accessibility in the near future, and also we just got funding for an innovation project around this that I hope will lead to something that could be an embryo of something that could then, when my grandchildren grow up, will be a standard on e-learning, because it's a long way to go, and it needs much more. It's more complex than sort of an ordinary website. So we definitely need more standards. I'm a great fan of standardization, but you need time. It takes time.
the problem is not solvable by the actual web accessibility standards. Maybe Sebastian, you have an idea?
Sure. The web accessibility standards in place are the major guideline for putting content online. But
Yes.
as Susanna mentioned, this is a MOOC is really not just about the content. It requires all kinds of different dynamic structures that, like, for example, students have to engage with each other in a big scale MOOC. Then you can never actually get by without peer grading and these kind of processes,
Yes.
discussion forums and so on and so forth. People really need more than just purely accessible content, but also the processes around that need to be covered.
But you and Mathieu, you agree there are no real standards for MOOCs?
There are standards for the web, and they are more than enough for to create an accessible platform. But on the interactions principles, no, there is no standards. And I think maybe it's a bit too soon, because the possibilities of the platforms are quickly evolving. So we need to know how it works before defining a standard, because usually defining a standard just freezes innovation sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'd prefer making a standard, but later, maybe in a few years.
Okay, fine. These were the questions we like to discuss here in front of you, but I'm pretty sure that you have questions. So it's now open for the public to raise your hand and ask the specialists about MOOCs. Are you all sleeping or shy? Excuse me, yes. This one. You have? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Gerrit van den Brede from Belgium. My question is, how many MOOCs are there running at the moment, or how many are you aware of? Is it more than 100, or can you say something about that?
I have no count of this, but it's
Estimates.
in the matter of the thousands. I'd say thousands, but is it 1,000? Is it 5,000? I don't know.
Well, one.
Okay. Thank you.
Is another I have a question. It's, I think, quite well known that lots of people start MOOCs, but maybe 10-20% finishes them. Is that normal? Is that a startup problem? Or
We get that question a lot.
So you know the answer then.
I have tried to answer many times. I have different ways of addressing the problem. The problem is not to tell that MOOCs are working or not working because they only have 10 or 20% of success rate. Just a few facts. When you subscribe to a MOOC, usually it's free and just one click away. When you subscribe to school, well, it's mostly not free, and you have some engagement with the student and the school and the parents involved. So, of course, you might want to go at the end of school more than at the end of a MOOC. That's one point. The other point is that I think MOOCs can get better at engaging and involving students, but people have different level of engagement. We've seen people really engage and they want the certificate and they are willing to pay for it. We've seen people just looking around and maybe doing some exercises, or just looking around and maybe 1 or 2 videos, and they'll see then if they want to do more. And most of the people like what they see, but they have no real incentive in finishing the MOOC. And that's what's creating the problem. And many people are not organized enough. So for some people going to high school or to the faculty, or I don't know, it's hard because they can't organize their time, and they can't do it for a MOOC because they just don't have an agenda or something they can rely on. They don't know how to use an agenda.
Yeah.
So it varies a lot for the people. What I like to say is not the relative value of people finishing a MOOC, but the absolute value we can get from a MOOC. Yeah. Because if we have like 50,000 people starting a MOOC and only 10% people finishing it, that's still 5,000 people finishing a course. And that's a lot more than what you could achieve with this entire audience. And even if everyone was completely listening, understanding, and finishing it, they could not do this. So on an absolute value, we get more value with MOOCs than without.
Yeah. Okay, yes, please.
And
Unless there are urgent questions coming up.
Okay,
Yes.
my name. Somebody else?
Sorry,
My name is Anton Bolving. I'm from Access for All Foundation in Switzerland. We're just bringing forward accessibility, web accessibility in Switzerland. I have a question on the online of MOOC. My question is downloadable documents, electronic documents, is it a subject, or is MOOC online? I mean, and if yes, if it is a subject, if there are electronic documents to download, is accessibility a subject also for these documents?
Yeah, I can answer. So I would comment on that in terms of that the MOOC really requires a real-time online environment with respect to the synchronicity of the communication running in there. You have people who are interacting with each other, and that does not necessarily imply that the teacher is telling something or the instructor is telling something, then other people follow later. But it can happen more dynamically than that. So this is one thing that requires things to be more online than offline. But of course, you're right, there can be materials that people can look at that are of a more static nature, like documents, or maybe also multimedia formats, like videos and things like this. And then, in theory, people can download it and watch it or look at it later online. And just to conclude, of course, these documents should be accessible, especially if you are creating those documents yourself. Of course, in some cases, external documents are used, but then they should be accessible as well, or at least you have to filter a little bit in choosing these.
Yeah, Susanna, you wanted to add something?
No, it was just
To the
to the
yes.
previous question.
Yes, please, go on.
think it's I don't think it's a bad thing that people can try things. I think that I completely agree with Mathieu, but also I think that people can try something and then no, I didn't want that, I want the other thing. I think that's something positive that people try out. I mean, that should be a positive thing. I always hear that question too. So.
Yeah, but I understand it's actually the number of people that finish a course is much more important than. But you know, the big universities in the States, they often come up with 100,000 people following our course as a kind of publicity, which it is not in itself. Okay. So we are talking about MOOCs, and there is a question. Yes, please.
Yes, good afternoon. My question concerns MOOC. I would like just to ask about translation, about language in general. For example, as the content is open, if there is a possibility to translate the content, or if there is courses in language different than English and French. Thank you.
Well, you study them, but it's all English?
Yes, I think in many of the MOOCs that we have looked into, there are possibilities to translating things, but and we also have in different, in all the languages that we work in, very small languages, that usually you work in English because then you would reach more people. If we were to produce a MOOC in Swedish, then we would be just having 9 million people that could actually take the course, and that would be sort of counterproductive to the whole idea with spreading it throughout the world. But I think there are MOOCs in Spanish at least, and many other languages as well. But I mean, English tends to be the sort of general language.
Yes, an interesting question for me, because I'm coordinating a transnational MOOC project, right? So we had a big discussion about this topic with all the European partners that come at least from 5 different language areas. And so after the discussion was concluded unsuccessfully, we simply decided to do everything in English. Because it is the language that is most widely spoken, and then also, of course, in future versions of the offer, there is still the options to add more languages later.
Yeah, but
I'm working on the same subject, in fact, about translation. And what we are doing, it really depends on the content of the course. If it's text-based or video-based, it just doesn't work the same way. But translation for this type of content tend to cost a lot. And we've been doing mostly content in French on Open Classrooms. Now we have courses translated in English. And how we do this? Well, the content is accessible for free, and you can get the sentence in a translation environment. We use a website called Transifex, so everyone can translate the strings of the course at any time. And we've been translating successfully little courses, but for big courses we need to have professional translators for the text. And for the videos it costs even more, because if you are seeing someone speaking on the screen, you could of course translate with the subtitles, but from what I've seen, people expect someone speaking their language. They prefer this. So it costs a lot to shoot again the video. And one thing that works could be not to see the teacher and just have a background voice. And doing the voice over again costs, of course, but less than shooting over the video again, which is a lot.
Yeah, but you still remain with the point then that you will have very little discussions between the participants if you start working in many languages.
I would have silos with different languages. And for instance, I have a HTML5 course, which is both in French and in English. Yeah. And mostly people speaking French go with French-speaking people, English-speaking, because they don't speak each other's language. But that's what I thought. But in fact, many people try to speak the language of the other when they know there are other language. So if they have at school or they have a single language, they tend to go to the MOOC with the second language to help people. And they like it because people like exchanging with each other. So that's something I wasn't expecting, but people try to speak with each other.
It's a nice result, extra result. So I think we have to finalize this session unless there are still questions. Yes, Cathy?
Hi, Katie Durand, part of Brynet. I have a question around the word open. What about the intellectual property of these courses that are often collaborative? Who owns these courses, and can anyone use them and put them on their own digital platforms?
It's an interesting question. We have been also spent lots of energy and time discussing in the multinational consortium. is something we are trying to do as simple as possible. So what we are really doing is licensing all of the content we create with a CC attribution, Creative Commons attribution only license. And there has been concerns in the consortium, because that means that anybody could take the content and then start making money out of it. But we have a problem with limiting the license, because, as we mentioned before, for example, if you exclude, for example, editing the content or manipulating the content, so you make it a non-derivative license, that will mean that you cannot translate it, for example. And so we have to keep it really basic. The best would be just to actually not use any license at all and just give it away and not worry about it. But then it would mean that somebody could take it and claim, I did it. And that would mean that the creators, the authors of the content, would get a lawsuit maybe if somebody would be really evil, and that we don't want either. So there has to be at least some really basic licensing and we decided to use Creative Commons attribution only in this case. We are still debating it, but it looks very much like we are going to do it this way. Yeah, it's a hot topic. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And just add that we use Creative Commons too, but it's slightly different because we have attribution and non-commercial, because we reserve the rights of the commercial use of the content. Yeah. So there have been discussion about this, and of course people want more freedom about this. Some people want more control, but we decided that it was a fair trade between an all openness of what you can do with the content and limiting too much the rights. So you can derive the content, but you still have to say who did it, and you can't make money out of it, because we did invest, and the author did invest some of this time to do it.
Yeah. Okay, then I think it's time to close this session. So thanks a lot for your attention. Especially thanks also to the three specialists, Mathieu, Sebastian and Susanne, and have a nice afternoon.